We come on a 33, ma, mammy and me, round all the shops we did roam. We spent and we spent, till our cards got bent. I feel so fed up, I wanna go home. The Glasgow rain is falling down, cleaning up the streets again. Now it's easing off a bit, but it'll come in sheets again. Why can't the weather get itself together? Seems like the rain's been falling forever. Fog is rolling up the Clyde, it's getting hard to see again. All the buses will run slow, I'll be late for my tea again. Why can the weather get itself together? Seems like the fog's been rolling forever. When I was a kid there could be sunshine. When I was a kid it could be warm. Nowadays it seems like we've been lucky. Any day that goes without a storm. Comedians, they all feel sad, since Hancock took the hard way out. Milligan kept going mad, Charlie Drake got knocked about. Lots of funny fellers think on Peter Sellers. A heart attack for every wife. Bye-bye Barbarella. When I was a kid there could be sunshine. When I was a kid it could be warm. Nowadays it seems like we've been lucky. Any day that goes without a storm. The snow is falling on the roof. The streets are full of ice again. Country's going to the dogs. We're as poor as mice again. Now or never, time to get together. Seems like we'll be falling forever.
More works have been written about the Gorbals area of Glasgow than any other in the city. From the novel No Mean City, set in the Gorbals tenements of the 1920s and 30s and reputed to be based on gang warfare in Glasgow at that time, to the autobiographies of the rich and famous who hailed from this much maligned part of the city. And strangely for such a well-known area, the Gorbals as a district does not now officially exist, at least on the electoral maps. According to historians, the first mention of the Gorbals as a name appears in the 13th century, and it would be little more than a small cluster of huts beside the River Clyde surrounded by moorland. The old village of Gorbals was known as Brigend or Bridgend until the 18th century, but any kind of rapid population growth and extensive building on adjacent lands did not happen until the 19th century. Originally the Gorbals was a small village with one street called appropriately Main Street, which was eventually changed to Gorbal Street, a name it retains now. However, over time the original village was cleared and the areas of land to the east and west of the village main street, known as Lorston and Hutchison Town, were built upon, and this ultimately created a greater Gorbals area, although it was never known as that. And while Hutchison Town stretched beyond Crown Street, to most people who lived there, the Gorbals as a district stretched from Crown Street in the east to Eglinton Street in the west, which explains why Gorbals Cross became the unofficial centre of the area, a title it no longer holds. Modern Gorbals is still made up of the Lorston and Hutchison Town districts, but the name Gorbals has been removed, at least from the electoral map, and in 1999 the City Council had split the Gorbals area between 3 local wards, these being Hutchison Town, Kingston and Tory Glen. But to everyone who knows it, the Gorbals still stretches from Eglinton Street in the west, but now to the banks of the River Clyde in the east on the border with Bridgeton. However much boundaries and official titles may change, the entire area still retains the name Gorbals. While there have been numerous histories written about the Gorbals, they have tended to concentrate upon the gangsters, millionaires, celebrities and politicians who hailed from this so-called notorious area of Glasgow. This film is not about that. Instead, we take a look at the Gorbals from the people's point of view. The majority of people never knew the gangsters or the millionaires, and their lives barely touched the celebrities and politicians. What people remember about the Gorbals are the streets where they lived and the characters that inhabited their streets. They remember the colour, humour, drama and tragedy of everyday life. Husbands and wives, boys and girls, shopkeepers and midwives, coalmen and ragmen. Stories from the steamy and the pawn shop, the cinemas and the theatres, the bookies and the bars. Home life, working life and social life in an area of rich and poor, with one of the widest cultural and religious groupings ever concentrated in such a small area. But the Gorbals is not a big place. In the 30s, 90,000 people crammed into its small acreage. In the 90s, only around 10,000 souls inhabit the same living area, which gives a stark example of the overcrowded living conditions of the past. Between the 1950s and the 1980s, the Gorbals was flattened by the bulldozers, as the old tenements bit the dust and a vast exodus of people took place. Many made their way to the new housing schemes, such as Castlemilk, a vast housing scheme on the southeast of the city, and many more scattered further afield. There are regular visitors to the Gorbals from the USA, Canada, South Africa and Australia, many of whom were the children or grandchildren of original inhabitants. If they stored in their heads tales from a granny of the old tenements, the reality of modern Gorbals would disappoint them. The tenements, like the old grannies, are gone, but unfortunately the old stories of poverty, bad housing and unemployment still ring true in the modern version of Gorbals, despite a renewed effort to regenerate this ancient borough. While the Gorbals may still be poor in terms of economic wealth, it can still boast a friendly and resilient community full of humour and determined to survive whatever life throws at them. While the politicians talk about the Gorbals in terms of a new urban village that mixes new homeowners with existing council and housing association tenants, all the inhabitants want is employment and decent housing within which to bring their families up. Buildings and streets may change, but some things never do. The beginning of the end of the old Gorbals began in the 1950s, and it is this era where our people's history begins, and in some way ends. The Gorbals buildings and characters began to disappear then, and while it took another 30 years before the last of the old buildings disappeared, the exodus of people began then, and saw the beginning of the end of an era and a way of life.
I was young in a slum, but I never knew bad times. To me, every day was a summer holiday pastime. I lived in Cumberland tenements and splashed in backcourt puddles, and waked in ash-filled middens with the hope of secret treasures, and ran and screamed and shouted with belief, no doubt, that we were kings and queens in our kingdom without boundaries. And we dined on silver salvers, and we all lived in palaces. Hudgies and coal lorries and games and stanks with jories. And football was played in smooth tarmac streets, where a ball always burst that squashed when you would hoodie it. And lassies played ball on chalk-filled walls, and skipped in the crosses as frost nipped at noses. See, brains could adapt and just made the best, even when the family was on a bloody means test.
This was Gorbal Street, originally called Main Street, as it looked back in the late 1950s. and this is how it looks today. It is not easy to recognise it as the same street, but fortunately a few landmarks still remain. The old tenement that now stands forlorn and derelict on Gorbal Street is one of only a few original buildings still standing from the Gorbals clearances. This tenement is in the area known as Lorston, and as you can see it is in a severe state of disrepair, waiting to be regenerated itself, but in its day it would have been one of the better tenements in the area. Now huge high-rise blocks tower above it, themselves the subject of much local speculation as to if or when they too will be reduced to rubble. The tenement itself used to house the British Linen Bank, and the Rob Roy bar used to stand next door to it, one of many hundreds of pubs in the Gorbals of the past. If the Gorbals was short on economic prosperity, it was never short of places where you could drink your miseries away.
I was a barman at the Morven, and I did the Cecil too. I had a wee stint at the Citizens and I went to Jackson's for a few. The Cumberland Arms had its charms and Roper's produced a fine brew. The Rob Roy bar never produced a star, but it always had a queue. The High had its characters and Doyle's at the Cross, and the Holly Tree had no tinsel, but the service was always fast. The pubs were always bulging, but now they're all gone too. Are all the drinkers dead and gone, like horses, turned to glue?
Close by the Rob Roy bar stood the Gorbals Baths, demolished in 1981. A small park stands on the site. Tenements in those days had no bathroom and most had outside toilets, so once a week most people would go to the public baths for a wash. Sometimes the baths and the steamy were together, so women could go there not only to wash themselves but to wash the family's clothes. There were a few steamies then, notably on Gorbal Street and Old Rutherglen Road, but the only one remaining today, albeit derelict, lies in the adjacent Portlands area. Across the road from the baths was the Citizens Theatre, one of the few buildings from the past still standing in the street. It would be wrong to suggest the Citizens is a Gorbals theatre. In reality it is a theatre that just happens to be situated in the Gorbals. More popular amongst Gorbalonians was the building next door to it that used to be the Palace Picture Hall. Sadly the palace is long gone and the space where it once stood is now a car park for the citizens. The pictures were the big entertainment in the days before television came, and the queues outside were often entertained by a range of local talent.
I remember Frankie McCusker, the cinema queue busker. He could sing, he could dance, and play moody. And he made a few coppers for the line of picture goers. The oil a throat that was awfully kind of drouthy. Then TV came to end his playing days. The queues vanished like snow off a dike. The picture halls became bingos and he lost his vocation overnight.
The junction at the bottom of Gorbal Street is Gorbals Cross, practically unrecognisable from the past. Yet the cross was once the hub of all life here, but now, well, it has lost all of its character and looks like just another junction. Everyone still asks what happened to the big round clock. Nobody seems to know. Today it is a soulless intersection, but to everyone who lived here, this was the heart of the Gorbals. People from every street and of all nationalities met at Gorbals Cross. Gorbals Cross, as befits its status in the past as the heart of the Gorbals, was also a regular meeting place for couples on a first date. Sadly, not all dates materialised.
My name was Izzy O'Rourke, and I'd been there since 7 o'clock, waiting for my click to show. On the corner of Boots, on my bleached blonde roots, where the hell was my Romeo? But I knew I was in a dizzy, standing there, feeling silly, because it was nearly 7:45. Still I waited and shivered, odding up like a dog's dinner, just in case it would turn up late. And if it did, I'd have a face like fizz and a tongue ready to attack it. But deep inside, I'd sigh with relief and resist the temptation to smack it.
The area to the west of Gorbals Cross is Lorston, named after the man who developed the land in the 19th century. This is Bedford Street, showing the old Cochrane shop at the corner of Bedford Street and Coburg Street. The Morven Bar stood at the corner of Bedford Street and South Portland Street. Many of the tenements in Lorston deserved to be demolished, but others that could have been saved and refurbished met the same fate. The tenements of the past were so overcrowded and packed so closely together that there was little room for privacy. Whatever went on in your house, everybody was sure to hear about it. The streets of Lorston, like all the others, resounded to children at play. There were no parks and children had to play in the streets and pavements. Pictured here is Betty Woodburn, aged 4, born in Herbertson Street. Also snapped as children were Betty Olson and family. Both still live in the Gorbals and have seen regenerations come and go. In the streets, boys played football or cowboys and Indians, and girls played at shops. Wherever you went in the Gorbals, there would always be one little girl playing that game that every little girl played.
Her name was Ginty Hall, and she stood there playing ball on the dirty chalk-filled tenement wall. She went to Jenny Grocer's to buy her rare wee stoters. She played for hours till she got cold. 1, 2, 3, O'Leary. I wonder why she never got weird, a stoating boys up against a wall. She liked to skip and hop and play at games of shot, but her favourite game of all was ball.
Close by Bedford Street stood Portugal Street, where the old St John's Church once stood. The church was demolished in the 1980s, and the ground still stands empty and neglected to this day. Also on Portugal Street was the old model lodging house, where the homeless of the past could find shelter. The building looks quite impressive, but has gone the same way as all the others. A tiny stretch of Portugal Street remains, but there are no buildings now. Close by Portugal Street was Dunmore Street. Once it too was filled with tenements and people, but now has completely vanished. The street was fondly remembered by former resident John Mitchell and his family, pictured here in the early 1940s. Another well-known character within the tenements was the local midwife. Often elderly and with no medical qualifications, these women, for they were always women, had only a vast wealth of experience and knowledge in helping to deliver children. And in the days when money was hard to come by and doctors had to be paid for, the midwife was never short of work, most of it unpaid. Adjacent to Dunmore Street was Norfolk Street. It ran from Gorbals Cross to Bridge Street and still does to this day. Norfolk Street is one of the few streets in the area that retains some original tenements and gives you a good idea of how well designed some of the Gorbals tenements were. Most of the tenements were demolished, but a few somehow survived the mass clearance, when similar buildings of architectural stature literally bit the dust. While the stone-clean tenements on Norfolk Street show off the grand carving used, it should be remembered that the tenements did not always look so grand. Slum landlords became the scourge of the Gorbals, packing human beings in like sardines, while remaining oblivious to the need for maintenance of their properties. With a great influx of immigrants into the Gorbals from Ireland, Poland, Lithuania and Russia, there was a pressing need for accommodation. Many tenements were vastly overcrowded, crumbling inside and out and infested with bugs, much to the consternation of parents with children. The new high-rise flats that now sit in Norfolk Street are an improvement in the tenements, but to many who live in them today it's not so much of an improvement. It is sad to think that as we approach a new millennium, Gorbals people still have to live in slums. In the modern high-rise prisons, it is ironic that many people, particularly the elderly, still long for the old tenements. Eglinton Street is the western boundary of the Greater Gorbals area, and the Bedford and Coliseum cinemas stood here as well as the Eglinton Electrium. The EE's is gone now, and the Bedford now stands empty and closed, but the Coliseum battles on as a bingo hall. The Coliseum was the first picture hall in the Gorbals to show a talking film. Eglinton Street ran up to the Toll and into Pollockshaw's Road. At Eglinton Toll stood the Plaza Ballroom, a popular dance hall in the past. It still stands but is no longer the upmarket venue it once was. Beyond the Plaza Ballroom took you into what was in the past the more affluent area of Govan Hill. For Gorbals kids, perhaps a few adults too, Govan Hill was the place where you wanted to go midgie raking.
I remember me and Bill went up to Govan Hill to see what we could find in their bins, with holes in their sonnies, the arse out our trousers, and licking snotters with the tap of our lips. But that was years ago in bygone days of old. As I sit here in my house looking back, and I'll never forget, lest I get a big head, that I'm just wee midgie raker at heart.
Eglinton Street ran parallel to the West Coast Railway line and down to Bridge Street, home of many businesses including insurance companies. Most people, regardless of their status, had some kind of life insurance policy, if only to pay for their burial, and a common sight around the streets of the Gorbals was the society man. Adjacent to Eglinton Street stood Abbotsford Place, once one of the most sought-after addresses in the Gorbals. The well-known Janine's Hotel stood here, and there were many splendid buildings housing professional people from doctors and dentists to teachers. Tragically, every single dwelling in Abbotsford Place was demolished by a short-sighted city council, and the only structure left standing was Abbotsford School. It still stands today and is almost 120 years old, but sadly the school was closed in 1997. There were many schools in the Gorbals, including Camden Street, Buchan Street, Hayfield Street, St Luke's and Adelphi Terrace, but one character remained constant in them all.
He was Danny the Janny at Buchan Street School. Their faces miserable as sin. Ah, boy, said he didn't, but I saw him break the window, and that's why I'm reporting him. He said the schools were full of wee buggers who'd all grow up to be burglars and muggers. Education was wasted in Wayne's, he'd say. They called him cynical and tight-fisted and greeting-faced and twisted, but so might you be if you take put up with him all day.
School days are remembered fondly by some and less so by many others. For in the past, with disease and poverty so rife, many children never made it to school at all. Pictured here is local historian Ellen McAllister's aunt, who died at a very young age from a disease rarely seen today, bubonic plague. Most families in the Gorbals were large, but many children died young. Of course, growing up in the Gorbals, as in many other places, children were not aware that they were deprived of anything. Children then, like children now, take life as they find it. Close by Abbotsford Place stood Surrey Street. The picture from the past has hardly changed over the years, although the grain mill in the distance is gone now. Opposite Surrey Street is Pollockshaw's Road, leading to the junction at Cumberland Street. This is Cumberland Street, the only street in the Gorbals which links Lorston and Hutchison Town in a single street, and runs from Eglinton Street in the west all the way along through Hutchison Town, where it eventually turns and joins Caledonia Road. Streets such as Matheson Street and Sandy Falls Street run off Cumberland Street. Like Crown Street, Cumberland Street was a main shopping thoroughfare in the past, with many shops. It also housed the Paragon Picture Hall. On the west side of Cumberland Street, near Eglinton Street, stood the railway station. Underneath the station there used to be a grocer's shop. During the war it was a target for young boys and girls looking to supplement their rations.
I walked like a cowboy, but I was really a bad boy when I raided the old grocer's shop. I was looking for food to supplement the ration book, and instead of that, guess what I got? On a jar, on a shelf in the back of the store was a pile of old threepenny bits. My eyes bulged out of their sockets as I filled up my pockets, and I thought, now I'm rich. The problem, you see, was I could hardly walk as the weight of those threepenny bits slowed me up. Out the window, did a shimmy, scared the police would show. Walking like a pregnant pup, I got away, but I really must say I never did another raid again. It was a hell of a bother to explain to my mother where I got my ill-gotten gains.
One of the main landmarks on Cumberland Street was St Francis Church. Although it was feared this magnificent building might also be reduced to dust, wiser heads prevailed and the decision was taken to completely refurbish the structure, and it reopened in 1998 as a community arts and education centre. In the past, Matheson Street and Sandy Falls Street ran past the church. Both streets are now almost totally obliterated, although the church buildings survive. St Francis once also had a school attached, but this is gone now. In the future, the building will be surrounded by new housing as the city father's vision of a new Gorbals urban village rapidly begins to take shape in the area. But while St Francis has been saved, the many shops which once lined Cumberland Street in the past have almost completely vanished. Old Rutherglen Road was one of the main roads running the length of Hutchison Town, from Gorbal Street all the way to the River Clyde in the east. Like Cumberland Street and Crown Street, Old Rutherglen Road once housed many shops and pubs. Local artist Tommy Smith has captured a winter scene here that reminds everyone that the Gorbals of the past was not in black and white, only the photographs were, and for local colour you only had to look towards another thriving business in the old Gorbals. For all that there was little money around, people still liked to look their best, and the Gorbals had a veritable host of barber shops dotted all over the area. Old Rutherglen Road also held one of the most famous businesses in the Gorbals and other areas of Glasgow, the ubiquitous pawnbroker. It also housed one of the more unusual business premises in the Gorbals, and one of the most well-known of characters. Few people would have this occupation on their CV nowadays.
His name was Joseph Roper, and he was a Gorbals hen choker. He worked in the all steamy pen, wringing necks and plucking feathers, working away in all weathers. That line of chickens never seemed to end. But now he's on a pension and pills for water retention, with arthritis in each killing horn. All the years of choking has left him worn out and broken. He wished he'd been a plumber instead.
The Tumax factory in Old Rutherglen Road is another building which has survived the bulldozer. Although it too lay empty for some time, it was completely renovated and now holds the staff of the City Council's housing and social work departments besides small business units. Opposite the Tumax is the old Rose Garden, once the haunt not of ghosts but Gorbals kids. The garden is now part park and part cemetery, and the gravestones along the walls give you an indication of just how old the ground is. Despite the massive upheaval out with its walls, the little rose garden has remained remarkably untouched over the years. Ballat Street runs parallel to the River Clyde from Gorbals Cross to Bridgeton. It was previously known as Govan Street, because in the past if you followed the road for miles in a westerly direction, you would eventually find yourself in the old borough by the Clyde. But like many Gorbals street names, it underwent a change. The suspension bridge on Ballat Street opposite McNeill Street spans the River Clyde and leads you to the People's Palace and Winter Gardens in Glasgow Green. Gorbals workers in the old Templeton carpet factory could trudge home across this bridge, and the same workers would skip lightly over it at weekends for the many events that used to be held on the green. The old library building on McNeill Street just off Ballat Street still stands and is used by local groups and businesses. As it too runs almost the length of the Gorbals, Ballat Street was intersected all along its length by smaller streets, like Moffat Street. The old Adelphi School on Ballat Street is now a business and education centre, and a new sports centre has been built beside it on the site of the old Hairworks. Also on Ballat Street is the College of Nautical Studies and the old St Luke's Church. St Luke's School, which once adjoined the church, is gone, but you can still see some of the original stone building. Also on Ballat Street was Green's Picture Playhouse, where many a Gorbals couple first got to know each other.
I was a wincher at the Greens, me and the bird sitting there with our ice creams, waiting for the picture to start. When the lights went down, we'd be on our honeymoon. In the back seat of the flicks, we were the stars. We'd been to hundreds of films and never seen one, just the odd bits here and there. Because even the most passionate of lovers eventually discover that they have to come up for air.
Beside the suspension bridge on Ballat Street stands the Strathclyde Brewery, and beside it the high-rise Riverside Estate. If the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, local people are only too aware of the brewery on their doorstep. the effects of the brewery, past and present, are also felt in other, more obvious ways. Ballat Street was also one of the main bus routes in and out of the Gorbals. Nowadays it's rare to see a bus in the area, but in the past tramcars, trolley buses and diesels regularly ran up and down a busy Ballat Street. Of course, if you wanted to get further away, the buses would carry you from Ballat Street into Central Station for a train down to the West Coast resorts like Ayr and Trim. But one place was favoured, not only by Gorbals people but Glaswegians all over the city.
The rocks, the beach, the crabs, the smell of rotten seaweed. The cloudy, drizzly days the sun would rarely see. I remember down by the seaside at Saltcoats, freezing on my holiday. We stayed in a tiny wee boarding house, my ma, my brothers and me. 4 to a bed at night, reading the Beano and the Dandy. We caught the train at Central and flashed by Dalry and crossed the dunes at Stevenson. I suddenly could see the sea. Eyes alight, my heart exploded and the excitement made me pee. Far from the grey tarmac of Gorbals, sunless, wet and windy Saltcoats by the sea.
Crown Street ran all the way from Caledonia Road to Ballat Street and was a main shopping thoroughfare thronging with people and shops. Here you used to see many local women doing their windy hanging as they watched the street life, or the passing pipe bands, May processions and funerals, or more commonly just gab to passing friends or acquaintances.
My kitchen was damp and minging, so I did my window hanging to give myself a breath of fresh polluted air. And I got all my latest gossip through my pal Jessie Mossop, standing gabbing in the dirty street below. Now my mother thought it was common for me to do my window jawing, but it was the only way to get the latest news. Scandal, dirt and all the latest. Have you heard that a waitress has run away with Ginty Hughes's man? Ida Ruff is up the duff. Big Bella's man's had enough. And Ellen Terry's getting married to a man that raises ferrets. Wee Bunty, she's got a fancy man on the side.
Crown Street was lined on both sides with every kind of shop and trader imaginable. As well as the Crownie Picture Hall, there were many other shops and bars on Crown Street. Coyle's fruit and vegetable shops were known throughout the city, and of course the ubiquitous newsagents, or Jenny Othings as people used to call them. Nowadays Crown Street is beginning to come alive again. It will never again hold as many shops as the past, but now it has the only supermarket in the area and a small but growing band of smaller traders. Not all of Crown Street's traders were static, of course. In the days before clean air, the blackened coal lorry was as familiar a sight as parked cars are today. Caledonia Road runs from Cathcart Road in the west and runs into Rutherglen Road in Oaklands. Dixon's Blazes Foundry once spread its glow all over the Gorbals from here, and the shell of a once famous Greek Thompson church still stands neglected at Cathcart Road Junction. Nowadays the foundry is gone with all of the tenements, and the only thing remaining from the past is the Southern Necropolis Cemetery, where many a famous name, now long forgotten, lies buried. The Gorbals is famous for its range of nationalities who lived there, and for the many different religions that were practised, and even the kids could get into the act at Sunday school.
When I sang the songs with the band I hope, no for faith or church or God, but for a handful of candy balls. I would convert, yes, I would turn, embrace any religion under the sun, but I saw no light, I heard no voice, except the conscience of a little boy. And I sang up so sweet and nice as I sold my soul for a bit of licorice. But I was just young and meant no harm, and just an open mind susceptible to charm. But no be talk or psalms or prayer. I was apostle of the chocolate eclair, and I was worried for quite a while about the disappointment behind their smiles, but as they always said to us waifs, God can work in mysterious ways. It's just that with the likes of me it had to be through Cadbury's.
for all its different religions, the Gorbals was an area of tolerance. Kids would be asked, are you a Billy or a Dan or an old tin can, and it would be naive to suggest that there was no racial or religious tensions. But in reality, poverty was and is the great leveller in any era. Even those in work rarely seem to rise far above those out of work, and in times of mutual need, people tend to forget their differences and help each other a lot more. Even the back court travellers could find a penny from people who could ill afford it.
Oh, God bless you and keep you, Mother McCree. His name was Joe McCusker, and he was a backcourt busker. He sang his heart out on a solo midden tour. He brought a tear to your eye, with songs from Dublin to Skye, and he ain't got a penny for the poor. He wanted to be on a stage, earning a hell of a big wage. But he knew he had to make a start somewhere, and sometimes it was hard, and he might never be a star. But he sang you a song from the heart. If you ever go across the sea to Ireland, then it's maybe at the closing of your day.
The Gorbals was renowned in the past for its great community spirit, which undoubtedly sprang from the hardships most people endured. While it may no longer embrace that community spirit to the same degree what area in the city does, there are still many friendly people who continue to struggle against the odds and try and help each other when they can. From the mess of the Gorbals back courts, our final destination is to an area of the Gorbals that is hardly ever credited with being a part of the area, but that is exactly what it is. Before the Sheriff Court was built beside the Clyde, row upon row of tenements stretched along the Clyde into Carlton Place. Buchan Street School stood where the court stands now, and the more elegant terraces on Carlton Place, Oxford Street, Nicholson Street and South Portland Street were and are still part of the Gorbals. They may not fit in with the established image of the Gorbals, and it is important to note that few of these more affluent buildings suffered the same fate of the tenements over the years, but nevertheless they have been part of the area for a long time. Few, if any, people live in these elegant mansions nowadays. They are mostly businesses, but there were some of the first houses built in the area and have stood for well over 100 years. In the past, South Portland Street was the site for a large Jewish synagogue at a time when there was a burgeoning Jewish population in the Gorbals. Now the synagogue and most of the Jewish population have migrated further south into the more desirable area of Giffnock, and Gorbals no longer holds the big melting pot of nationalities it once did, although the main mosque for the south side of Glasgow's Asian community now sits proudly in the Gorbals just off Gorbals Cross. Still, the ghosts of the Gorbals continue to haunt many people who live there, but were scattered far and wide from the community many still regard as home. The new Gorbals is unrecognisable from the old, and continues to change rapidly, but the Gorbals of old remains burned into the memories of its inhabitants. Bricks and mortar may come and go, but the memories linger on.
We come on a 33, Mom, Mammy and me, round all the shops we did roam. We spent and we spent, till our cards got bent. I feel so fed up, I wanna go home. I hate the Glasgow sales, I hate the things I bought. I'd like to chuck the lot and just go home. Come on, bus 33, I'll sit in somebody's knee. I feel so fed up, I wanna go home. The Glasgow rain is falling down, cleaning up the streets again. Now it's easing off a bit, but it'll come in sheets again. Why can't the weather get itself together? Seems like the rain's been start to see again. All the buses will run slow. I'll be late for my tea again. Why can't the weather get itself together? Seems like the fog's been rolling forever. When I was a kid there could be sunshine. When I was a kid it could be warm. Nowadays it seems like we've been lucky. Any day that goes without a storm. Comedians, they all feel sad since Hancock took the hard way out. Milligan kept going mad. Charlie Drake got knocked about. Lots of funny fellers think on Peter Sellers. Heart attack for every wife. Bye-bye Barbarella. When I was a kid there could be sunshine. When I was a kid it could be warm. Nowadays it seems like we've been lucky. Any day that goes without a storm. The snow is falling on the roof. The streets are full of ice again. The country's going to the dogs. We're as poor as mice again. Now or never, time to get together. Seems like